Moonbound and Chosen. Evana Corbin had spent her life feeling like something was missing, a part of her soul left behind in the shadows. But when the blood moon rose and her reflection in the water shifted, the truth clawed its way free. The wind howled, the trees watched, and when she turned, he was already there, golden-eyed and waiting. "You owe me a life," he murmured, voice dark as the storm curling behind him. "And tonight I have come to collect." Chapter 1. The Reflections Lie. The digital clock on Evana Corbin's nightstand blinked 2:57 a.m. Another night, another restless tossing, another dream she couldn't quite grasp, leaving only a lingering ache in her chest. She'd lived with this hollowness for as long as she could remember, a quiet dissonance that hummed beneath the surface of her otherwise ordinary life. 58 years, and the feeling persisted, a subtle but constant reminder that something was amiss. She rose, the cool wood floor a shock against her bare feet, and padded to the window. The late October air held a bite, hinting at the coming winter. Outside, the wind was picking up, rustling the leaves of the ancient oak that dominated her small backyard, its branches skeletal against the unusually bright, full moon. It wasn't quite a blood moon yet, but the coppery tinge was already there, painting the edges of the clouds with an unsettling hue. Evana lived a quiet life in the small, coastal town of Havenwood, Maine. A retired librarian, she spent her days tending her garden, reading of course, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. Her life was peaceful, predictable, perhaps even a little lonely, after her husband, Thomas, had passed away 5 years ago. But it was her life, built brick by brick on a foundation of quiet resilience. Yet, that ever-present emptiness gnawed at the edges of her contentment. Drawn by an inexplicable urge, Evana slipped on a worn cardigan and stepped out onto the back porch. The wind whipped around her, carrying the scent of salt and pine from the nearby woods. The moon, now higher in the sky, cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist with a life of their own. She walked towards the small, ornamental pond she'd built at the edge of her property, a haven for frogs and dragonflies in the warmer months. Tonight, however, the pond seemed different. The water, usually murky, was preternaturally still and clear, reflecting the blood-tinged moon like a polished mirror. Evana knelt at the edge, peering at her reflection. Her silver hair, usually neatly braided, had come loose, framing her face in a wild halo. Her blue eyes, usually bright and inquisitive, seemed shadowed, filled with an unfamiliar longing. And then it happened. A ripple disturbed the water's surface, not from the wind, but from within. Her reflection shifted. For a heartbeat, a flicker of a second, she saw not her own face, but another. A woman, younger, wilder, with eyes that glowed with an inner fire, a fierce, untamed spirit burning beneath her skin. The woman's hair was the same silver, but longer, thicker, interwoven with feathers and beads. Around her neck, a silver amulet, shaped like a wolf's head, pulsed with a faint, ethereal light. Evana gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her chest. She blinked, shook her head, convinced it was a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by lack of sleep. But the image, though gone, was seared into her mind. The woman's eyes, they held a knowledge, a power, that both terrified and exhilarated her. The wind howled, louder now, a primal cry that seemed to echo from the depths of the nearby woods. The trees, their branches swaying violently, appeared to watch her, their shadows stretching like grasping claws. A shiver ran down Evan's spine, a primal fear she couldn't explain. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if she were being hunted. Turning to flee back to the safety of her house, she stopped dead. He was there, standing at the edge of the woods, silhouetted against the blood-tinged moonlight, a figure as imposing and still as the ancient oaks surrounding him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his presence radiating a raw, untamed power that made the air crackle around him. Even from this distance, she could see his eyes that glowed with the same golden, unsettling light as the woman in the reflection. He didn't speak, didn't move, simply watched her. And in that gaze, Evan felt a connection, a pull, that was both terrifying and strangely familiar. It was a feeling of inevitability, of a destiny long foretold, a debt coming due. Then he spoke, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground she stood on, dark as the storm curling and gathering behind him, the first fat drops of rain beginning to fall. "You owe me a life," he murmured, "and tonight I have come to collect." His words, though softly spoken, struck Evan like a physical blow. They resonated with a truth she couldn't deny, a truth that had been buried deep within her subconscious, waiting for this very moment to surface. The emptiness she'd carried for so long suddenly felt different. Not empty, but waiting. Waiting for him. Waiting for this. The rain fell heavier, and the strange golden light continued to shine from his impossible eyes. Chapter 2. A debt called in. The rain, now a torrential downpour, plastered Avant's silver hair to her scalp, chilling her to the bone. Yet, the cold was nothing compared to the icy dread that gripped her heart. The man's words, "You owe me a life," echoed in her mind, a terrifying mantra that defied logic, yet resonated with a chilling familiarity. She took a hesitant step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the small, silver wolf's head pendant she always wore, a gift from Thomas years ago. He'd found it at an antique shop, claiming it reminded him of her strong, independent, and with a touch of wildness in her soul. She'd always cherished it, though she'd never understood its significance until this very moment. Who are you?" Evan managed to ask, her voice trembling despite her efforts to sound brave. The wind whipped her words away, but the man seemed to hear her nonetheless. He took a step forward, closing the distance between them, his movements fluid and graceful, like a predator stalking its prey. The golden light in his eyes intensified, illuminating his features with an unsettling clarity. He was strikingly handsome, with sharp cheekbones, a strong jawline, and a mouth that hinted at both cruelty and a deep, hidden sadness. His dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was pulled back from his face, revealing a network of faint, intricate scars that traced patterns across his forehead and down the side of his neck. He wore simple, dark clothing, a heavy woolen coat, dark trousers, and sturdy boots that seemed to blend seamlessly with the shadows of the night. "My name is Lorcan," he replied, his voice a low, resonant baritone that sent shivers down her spine. "And as for who I am, let's just say I'm a collector of debts. Ancient debts." He stopped a few feet away, his gaze unwavering, holding her captive. Evan felt a strange pull towards him, a magnetic force that both terrified and intrigued her. She wanted to run, to scream, to call for help, but she was rooted to the spot, caught in the web of his power. I don't understand," she stammered, clutching the wolf pendant tighter. "I don't owe anyone anything." Lorcan let out a low chuckle, a sound that held no mirth, only a weary resignation. "Don't you? Think, Evan. Think back. Beyond this life, beyond this memory, there are echoes, whispers of a past you've long forgotten. A past where promises were made, bonds were forged and broken." His words sparked a flicker of something within her, a distant memory, a fleeting image of a moonlit forest, a circle of standing stones, a whispered oath. She shook her head, trying to dispel the unsettling visions. "I'm an old woman, Lorcan," she said, trying to inject a note of defiance into her voice. "My memories are fading, not expanding. You have the wrong person." Lorcan's golden eyes narrowed. "The moon doesn't lie, Evan. And neither does the blood that runs in your veins. You are moonbound. You carry the mark of the Silverwood Pack, a lineage that stretches back centuries. A lineage that owes a debt to the Blackwood Pack. My pack." The words Silverwood Pack, Blackwood Pack, struck a chord within her, a deep, resonant vibration that shook her to her core. She remembered fragmented stories Thomas used to tell her, folklore and legends of the Maine wilderness, tales of shape-shifting wolves and ancient packs made under the light of the moon. She'd always dismissed them as fanciful tales, Bedtime stories meant to entertain, not to be taken seriously. Wolves? She whispered, her voice barely audible above the roar of the rain. You're talking about werewolves? Lorcan inclined his head, a slight, almost imperceptible movement. The term is crude, but essentially yes. We are lycanthrope, guardians of the balance, protectors of the ancient ways. And you, Evan, are one of us, whether you remember it or not. He reached out, his hand extended towards her, his long fingers brushing against the silver wolf pendant she wore. A jolt of energy, like static electricity, surged through her, making her gasp. This pendant, it's a symbol of your lineage, a reminder of the oath your ancestors swore. An oath to serve the Blackwood Pack, to protect our interests, to honor the ancient pact. An oath that was broken, generations ago, leaving a debt unpaid. A debt that now falls to you. Evan felt a wave of dizziness, her head spinning. This was all too much too fast. Werewolves, ancient packs, a forgotten lineage, it was the stuff of fantasy novels, not reality. And yet, looking into Lorcan's intense, golden eyes, she couldn't deny the truth that was staring her in the face. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice trembling. Lorcan's expression softened, a flicker of something akin to compassion crossing his features. I want what is owed. A life for a life. But I also offer you a choice. A chance to understand, to remember, to reclaim your heritage, to embrace the power that lies dormant within you. He paused, his gaze searching hers. Come with me, Evan. Come to Blackwood. Let me show you who you really are. And then you can decide how you wish to repay the debt. The rain continued to fall, the wind howled around them, and the blood moon hung heavy in the sky, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Evan looked from the imposing figure of Lorcan, with his unsettling eyes and his even more unsettling words, to the familiar comfort of her home, now seeming a million miles away. A life she thought she knew, shattered in an instant. The choice he offered a daunting precipice. She licked her lips, tasting the rain, and searched his face, her eyes wide. What exactly did going to Blackwood mean? Chapter 3. Whispers of Blackwood. Going to Blackwood, Lorcan repeated, his voice cutting through the drumming of the rain against the saturated earth, means leaving this life behind. At least for a time. He watched her carefully, the golden light in his eyes unwavering, searching for any flicker of understanding, of acceptance, in her expression. Evan's mind reeled. Leaving her life behind? The life she had carefully constructed, the quiet routine, the familiar comforts, it was unthinkable. And yet, the alternative remaining here, ignorant of the truth that Lorcan had revealed, haunted by the shifting reflection and the unsettling feeling of a missing piece, was equally unbearable. What if I refuse? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Lorcan's expression hardened, the brief flicker of compassion replaced by a steely resolve. The debt will be collected, Evan. One way or another. Refusal only delays the inevitable and complicates matters. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, a chilling reminder of the power he wielded. He gestured towards the woods, the dark, looming trees swaying in the wind like restless spirits. Blackwood is more than just a place, Evan. It's a sanctuary, a refuge for our kind. A place where you can learn to control the changes that are happening within you. A place where you can find answers to the questions that have haunted you your entire life. Changes? Evan glanced down at her hands, her fingers trembling. She hadn't felt any physical changes, apart from the unsettling vision in the pond. But the feeling of otherness, the sense of a hidden power stirring within her, was undeniable. What kind of changes? She asked, her voice laced with apprehension. Lorcan stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, his scent a mix of pine needles, wet earth, and something wilder, something untamed filling her senses. The change that comes with the blood moon, he said softly. The awakening of your true nature. The ability to shift. He paused, letting the word hang in the air, heavy with implication. Evan's breath caught in her throat. Shift? Into what? The image of the woman in the reflection, with her glowing eyes and fierce expression, flashed through her mind. Was that what he meant? I don't know if I can do that, she whispered, her voice filled with doubt and fear. Lorcan's gaze softened again. You are stronger than you think, Evan. You have the blood of warriors, of survivors, flowing through your veins. You have the strength to face this, to embrace your destiny. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her arm, as if hesitant to touch her. Let me help you. Let me guide you. I promise, I won't let any harm come to you. His words, though meant to be reassuring, sent a fresh wave of unease through her. Trust him? A stranger who claimed she was a werewolf, who spoke of ancient debts and shape-shifting. It was madness. And yet, there was something in his eyes, a depth of sadness, a hint of vulnerability, that made her hesitate. Evan looked back at her house, the light still on, casting a warm, inviting glow. It represented safety, familiarity, the life she knew. But it also represented a lie, a carefully constructed facade that hid a deeper, more complex truth. She took a deep breath, the cold, rain-soaked air filling her lungs. She had a choice to make. A choice between the known and the unknown, between fear and possibility. The blood moon hung high above, casting its eerie glow upon the scene, a silent judge of her decision. How long? She asked, her voice trembling. How long would I have to stay in Blackwood? Lorcan's lips curved into a faint smile, a hint of relief flickering in his golden eyes. As long as it takes, Evan, as long as it takes for you to understand, to learn, to accept. And perhaps, he added, his voice dropping to a whisper, as long as it takes for you to decide whether you wish to repay the debt or forge a new path. The ambiguity of his words sent a shiver down her spine. A new path? What did that even mean? But the seed of curiosity, of a longing for something more, had been planted. And despite her fear, despite her doubts, she knew she couldn't ignore it. She had spent her whole adult life avoiding risks. This felt like the biggest one of all. She met his gaze, her blue eyes locking with his golden ones. The rain continued to fall, washing away the remnants of her old life, cleansing the path towards an uncertain future. She felt her shoulders fall, almost in relief. All right, Lorcan, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I'll go with you. Show me Blackwood. I think it's time I learned who I am. A low rumble, not of thunder, but something deeper, vibrated from his chest, seeming to shake the ground. Chapter 4. The Pack Shadow. The journey to Blackwood was a blur. Lorcan didn't speak much, guiding Evan through the dense, rain-soaked woods with an effortless grace that belied his imposing size. The forest, which had seemed menacing and foreboding just moments before, now felt strangely welcoming. The scent of pine and wet earth was intoxicating, the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves a soothing lullaby. Evan, however, was far from soothed. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible reality that had been thrust upon her. Werewolves, ancient debts, a hidden lineage, it was all too much to process. She stumbled frequently, her city shoes ill-suited for the rough terrain, but Lorcan was always there, his strong hand steadying her, his presence a reassuring anchor in the swirling chaos of her thoughts. He moved with a peculiar gait not quite human, but not entirely animal either. There was a fluidness to his movements, a silent power that hinted at the wolf within. Evan found herself watching him, studying his every move, searching for clues, for any sign of the creature he claimed to be. After what felt like hours, the trees began to thin, revealing a clearing bathed in the eerie, coppery light of the blood moon. In the center of the clearing stood a collection of buildings, not the modern houses she'd expected, but structures that seemed to have grown organically from the forest itself. They were built of rough-hewn logs and stone, with steeply pitched roofs covered in moss and lichen. Smoke curled from chimneys, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something savory and unfamiliar. "Welcome to Blackwood," Lorcan said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to blend with the sounds of the forest. "Home of the Blackwood Pack." As they approached the settlement, Figures began to emerge from the buildings, their forms silhouetted against the flickering light of torches and lanterns. They were a diverse group, men and women of all ages, shapes, and sizes, but they all shared one common trait: the same golden, unsettling eyes as Lorcan. Evan felt a wave of apprehension wash over her. She was surrounded by werewolves, by creatures she'd only read about in books. The reality of her situation hit her with full force, and she instinctively moved closer to Lorcan, seeking his protection. He seemed to sense her fear, placing a reassuring hand on her lower back, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Don't worry," he murmured, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "They won't harm you. You're under my protection." His words, though meant to reassure, did little to quell her anxiety. The pack members were staring at her, their expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to outright hostility. She could feel their gazes on her, probing, assessing, judging. A woman stepped forward, her silver hair braided down her back, her golden eyes sharp and piercing. She was older than Lorcan, perhaps in her late 60s, but she carried herself with an air of authority that commanded respect. She wore a long, dark dress made of some kind of animal hide, adorned with intricate beadwork and feathers. "Lorcan," she said, her voice strong and clear, her gaze fixed on Evan. "Who is this?" Lorcan straightened, his posture radiating a quiet confidence. "This is Evan Corbin," he replied, "of the Silverwood lineage. She's here to address the debt." The woman's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her features. She studied Evan for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. "Silverwood?" she murmured, her voice laced with disbelief. "After all these years?" She turned to Lorcan, her expression hardening. "You brought her here? To Blackwood? Are you mad?" Lorcan met her gaze unflinchingly. "She has a right to know, Moira. A right to understand her heritage. And she deserves a chance to decide her own fate." Moira, apparently the leader of the pack, snorted. "Her fate was decided generations ago, Lorcan. The debt must be paid." Evan felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. The conversation, though cryptic, was deeply unsettling. It was clear that she was not a welcome guest, that her presence here was a source of conflict and tension. "I'm willing to listen," Evan said, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the fear that churned within her. "I want to understand. Please tell me about this debt." Moira hesitated, her gaze shifting between Evan and Lorcan. The other pack members remained silent, their eyes watching the exchange with rapt attention. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the weight of centuries of history pressing down on them. Finally, Moira sighed, a weary sound that spoke of ancient burdens and unresolved conflicts. "Very well," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Come. We'll talk inside. But know this, Evan Corbin. The past has a long shadow, and the debts of our ancestors are not easily dismissed." She turned and led the way towards one of the larger buildings, a long, low structure that seemed to be the central gathering place of the pack. Lorcan followed, his hand still resting lightly on Evan's back, a silent promise of protection. As Evan stepped across the threshold, leaving the blood moon behind and entering the dimly lit interior of the longhouse, she knew that her life had irrevocably changed. She was no longer just Evan Corbin, retired librarian, widow, ordinary woman. She was moonbound, a descendant of werewolves, caught in a web of ancient debts and hidden powers. And she had a feeling that the whispers of Blackwood were only just beginning. The heavy door thudded closed, sounding far too final for Evan's comfort. Chapter 5. Echoes of a Forgotten Life. The longhouse was surprisingly warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, rainy night outside. A large fire crackled merrily in a central hearth, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn log walls. The air was filled with the scent of wood smoke, roasted meat, and a faint, underlying aroma of pine and damp for the collective scent of the pack. Long tables and benches filled the space, and several pack members were already seated, eating and talking in low voices. They fell silent as Moira, Lorcan and Evan entered, their golden eyes turning to watch the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Moira led them to a smaller table near the fire, gesturing for Evan to sit. Lorcan remained standing, his presence a silent, protective barrier between her and the rest of the pack. "Eat," Moira said, pushing a wooden bowl filled with a hearty stew towards Evan. "You must be cold and hungry." Evan hesitated, her stomach churning with anxiety, but she knew she needed to keep up her strength. She took a tentative sip of the stew, surprised by its rich, savory flavor. It was unlike anything she'd ever tasted before, warming her from the inside out. As she ate, Moira began to speak, her voice low and measured, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames of the fire. "The story of the Silverwood and Blackwood packs is a long and complicated one, Evan. It stretches back centuries, to a time when our kind lived more openly in the world, before the fear and persecution drove us into hiding." She paused, taking a deep breath, as if the weight of the past was pressing down on her. The Silverwood and Blackwood packs were once allies, bound by a shared oath to protect the balance between the human and supernatural worlds. We lived in harmony, sharing territory, resources, and knowledge. "What happened?" Evan asked, her voice barely a whisper. Moira's expression darkened. "Betrayal," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "A Silverwood Alpha, your ancestor, Eric, broke the oath. He coveted the power of the Blackwood Pack, our connection to the ancient magic of this land. He led an attack, a brutal and unexpected assault, that decimated our ranks and shattered the alliance." Evan felt a chill run down her spine. Her ancestor, a traitor? A murderer? It was a difficult truth to swallow. "But why?" she asked. "Why would he do that?" Moira shrugged. "Power, greed, jealousy. The reasons are lost to time. But the consequences remain." She turned to look at Evan, her golden eyes piercing. "Eric was defeated, but not before inflicting a grievous wound upon our pack. He killed my ancestor, the then Alpha Lyra, and in doing so, he incurred a blood debt. A debt that, according to the ancient laws of our kind, must be repaid." "A blood debt," Evan repeated, her voice trembling. What does that mean?" "It means," Moira said, her voice hardening, "that a life must be given for a life taken. A Silverwood life for a Blackwood life." Evan's heart pounded in her chest. A life for a life? Was that what Lorcan meant when he said she owed him a life? Was she expected to sacrifice herself to atone for the sins of her ancestor? Lorcan, who had remained silent until now, spoke, his voice low and firm. "That is the traditional interpretation, yes. But there are other ways." Moira shot him a sharp look. "Other ways? What are you suggesting, Lorcan? That we simply forgive and forget? That we ignore the ancient laws?" Lorcan met her gaze unflinchingly. "The laws are not always black and white, Moira. There is room for interpretation, for compassion. Evan is not Eric. She is not responsible for his actions. She carries his blood," Moira retorted. "She bears the mark of the Silverwood Pack. The debt is hers, whether she likes it or not." Evan felt trapped, caught in a crossfire between two powerful forces. She looked from Moira, with her rigid adherence to tradition, to Lorcan, with his quiet defiance and his protective stance towards her. "What other ways are there?" Evan asked, her voice directed at Lorcan. He turned to her, his golden eyes softening. "There are rituals," he said. "Tests of strength, of loyalty, of transformation. Ways to prove that you are not your ancestor, that you are worthy of redemption." He paused, his gaze searching hers. "And there is also the possibility of a bond. A soul bond between a Silverwood and a Blackwood. A bond that would unite the two packs, heal the ancient rift, and absolve the debt." A soul bond? The words sent a shiver down Evan's spine. It sounded intense, intimate, irreversible. And with whom was this bond to be forged? The thought flickered and died before she could form it, but not before a warmth spread unbidden through her. Moira scoffed. "A soul bond? With whom? You Lorcan? Don't be ridiculous." You are the heir to the Blackwood pack. You cannot bond with a Silverwood, especially not one who carries the stain of Eric's betrayal. Lorcan's expression remained impassive, but Evan saw a flicker of something pain, resignation, in his eyes. He didn't answer Moira's question, instead turning back to Evan. The choice is yours, Evan, he said, his voice low and earnest. You can choose to face the rituals, to prove your worth, or you can explore the possibility of a bond. But know this, either path will be difficult, demanding, and potentially dangerous. Evan felt overwhelmed by the weight of the decision before her. Her head was spinning, her heart aching. Rituals, tests, a soul bond, it was all too much, too fast. She needed time to think, to process, to understand. The fire crackled merrily, and the scent of a stew was turning her stomach. She stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back with a scraping sound that drew the attention of the other pack members. I need some air, she stammered. I need to think. Without waiting for a response, she turned and fled the longhouse, back out into the cold, rainy night. The blood moon, still hanging heavy in the sky, seemed to mock her, a constant reminder of the impossible situation she found herself in. She had to get her bearings, had to plan, and had to find a way to understand. Chapter 6. The Scent of Pine and Storm. The cold air hit Evan like a slap, jolting her out of the stifling atmosphere of the longhouse. She gasped for breath, her lungs burning, her heart pounding like a trapped bird against her ribs. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the ground was still slick and muddy, making her footing treacherous. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get away, to escape the weight of the pack's expectations, the crushing burden of the ancient debt. She stumbled through the darkness, her senses overwhelmed by the unfamiliar sights and sounds of the Blackwood settlement. She found herself drawn towards the edge of the clearing, towards the dark, looming trees that marked the boundary of the forest. The scent of pine and wet earth, which had seemed so welcoming before, now felt different. Wilder, more primal, laced with an undercurrent of danger. She stopped at the edge of the trees, leaning against a rough bark trunk, trying to catch her breath. The blood moon, partially obscured by clouds, cast an eerie, shifting light on the scene, making the shadows dance and writhe. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing thoughts, to make sense of the whirlwind of information that had been thrown at her. Werewolves, ancient debts, blood sacrifices, soul bonds, it was like something out of a nightmare, a bizarre and terrifying dream that she couldn't wake up from. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, there was a flicker of something else. A sense of excitement, a feeling of belonging. It was a strange, unsettling sensation, this pull towards the unknown, towards the wild, untamed world that Lorcan had revealed to her. A twig snapped behind her, and she whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat. Lorcan stood there, his form silhouetted against the faint moonlight, his golden eyes glowing in the darkness. He'd followed her. Of course he had. Are you all right? He asked, his voice low and concerned. Evan shook her head, unable to speak. She was not all right. She was terrified, confused, overwhelmed, and yet strangely drawn to this man, to this creature who held her fate in his hands. He took a step closer, his presence radiating a warmth that seemed to dispel the chill of the night. She could smell him now, that unique scent of pine and wet earth and something wilder, something that made her senses hum with an unfamiliar energy. It was a scent that both calmed and excited her, a paradox that mirrored the conflicting emotions swirling within her. I know this is a lot to take in, he said softly, his gaze searching hers. I know it's overwhelming, but I promise you, I won't let any harm come to you. His words, though meant to be reassuring, sent a fresh wave of unease through her. Trust him? How could she trust him? He was a werewolf, a member of a pack that wanted her dead, or at least bound to them in some ancient, terrifying ritual. And yet there was something in his eyes, a depth of sadness, a hint of vulnerability, that made her hesitate. It was the same feeling she'd had before, back at her house, when he'd first appeared. A feeling of connection, of recognition. "Why are you doing this, Lorcan?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you protecting me? Your pack, they want me to pay the debt. They want a life for a life." He sighed, running a hand through his dark, silver-streaked hair. "I told you," he said. "The ancient laws are not always black and white. There is room for interpretation, for change." "But Moira, she seems so rigid," Evan said. "So determined to follow the old ways." Lorcan nodded. "Moira is the alpha. She bears the responsibility for the well-being of the pack. She has seen firsthand the consequences of broken oaths, of unchecked power. She is cautious. Understandably so." "And you?" Evan asked, her gaze unwavering. "What do you believe?" He hesitated for a moment, his golden eyes searching the darkness, as if looking for answers in the rustling leaves, in the whispering wind. "I believe," he said finally, his voice low and intense, "that the past should not dictate the future. That we should learn from our mistakes, but not be bound by them. That there is always hope for redemption, for a new beginning." His words resonated with a truth that Evan couldn't deny. She, too, believed in second chances, in the possibility of change. She'd spent her life clinging to the past, to the memory of her late husband, to the familiar comforts of her quiet routine. But now, faced with this impossible reality, she felt a stirring within her, a desire to break free, to embrace the unknown, to live. "This soul bond," she said, the words catching in her throat. What does it entail?" Lorcan's gaze intensified, his eyes locking with hers. "It is a joining of two souls," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. "A merging of minds, of hearts, of spirits. It is a bond that is stronger than blood, stronger than any oath. It is unbreakable. Unbreakable." The word sent a shiver down Evan's spine. It sounded both terrifying and alluring. The idea of being so intimately connected to another being, to share their thoughts, their feelings, their very essence, it was overwhelming. "And who would I be bonded with?" she asked, the question barely a whisper, though she already suspected the answer, dreaded and desired it in equal measure. Lorcan didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a depth of emotion that she couldn't decipher. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension, with the weight of unspoken desires. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, the boughs groaning. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible above the sounds of the forest. "If it came to that, Evan the bond would be with me." She looked up into his eyes, the scent of pine and storm surrounding her like a blanket, a protection. "And a promise." Chapter 7. Broken Bonds, New Beginnings. The silence that followed Lorcan's declaration was profound, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Evan's mind struggled to grasp the enormity of his words. A soul bond with him? The very idea was both terrifying and exhilarating, a dizzying mix of fear and something else, something she couldn't quite name. She searched his face, trying to decipher the emotions that flickered in his golden eyes' intensity, certainly, but also a vulnerability, a deep-seated longing that mirrored her own. He wasn't merely stating a fact, he was offering something. Something profound, something life-altering.
"Why?"
She finally managed to ask, her voice trembling. "Why would you offer that?" "Moira said Moira speaks for the pack," Lorcan interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "But she doesn't speak for me. I have my own reasons." He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming, his scent that intoxicating mix of pine and storm filling her senses. She felt a strange pull towards him, a magnetic force that defied logic, defied fear. It was as if some ancient, primal part of her recognized him, knew him, trusted him. "The bond," he continued, his voice low and resonant, "is not just a way to settle the debt. It's a way to heal the rift between our packs, to forge a new alliance, a new beginning. It's a way to unite us. But it's permanent," Evan said, her voice barely a whisper. "Unbreakable. What if it doesn't work? What if we're incompatible?" Lorcan's lips curved into a faint smile, a hint of sadness flickering in his eyes. There are risks, yes, but there is also the potential for something extraordinary. A connection that transcends anything you've ever experienced. A love that is eternal. Love. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Evan's heart skipped a beat. Love? Was that what this was? This strange, unsettling pull towards him. This feeling of recognition, of belonging? She had loved Thomas, her late husband, deeply and truly. Their love had been a quiet, comforting flame, a steady source of warmth and companionship. But this was different. This was a wildfire, a raging inferno that threatened to consume her, to transform her into something new, something wild, something more. I don't know what to say, she stammered, her mind reeling. I need time to think, to process all of this. Lorcan nodded, his expression understanding. Of course. I don't expect you to make a decision now. But consider it, Evan. Consider the possibility. Consider us. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her cheek, as if hesitant to touch her. His fingers brushed against a stray strand of her silver hair, sending a jolt of electricity through her. It was a simple gesture, a fleeting touch, but it spoke volumes. It was a promise of intimacy, of connection, of something deeper. I will, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She couldn't deny the pull, the undeniable attraction that she felt towards him. It was a dangerous, exhilarating feeling, and it terrified her. He withdrew his hand, his gaze lingering on hers for a moment longer before he turned and began to walk back towards the settlement. Evan watched him go, her heart aching with a mixture of fear and longing. She remained standing there, at the edge of the woods, for a long time, the cold night air chilling her skin, the blood moon casting its eerie light upon her. She thought about Thomas, about the quiet, comfortable life she had known. And she thought about Lorcan, about the wild, untamed world he represented, about the possibility of a new beginning, a new love, a new self. She thought about the broken bond of the past, the betrayal of her ancestor, the blood debt that hung over her head. And she thought about the potential for a new bond, a soul bond, that could heal the rift, unite the packs, and perhaps heal her own broken heart. The decision before her was immense, life-altering. She could choose to cling to the past, to the safety of the familiar, or she could embrace the future, the uncertainty, the danger. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, chasing away the shadows of the night, Evan finally turned and walked back towards the Blackwood settlement. She didn't know what the future held, what path she would ultimately choose. But one thing was certain. She was no longer the same woman who had stood by her pond, staring at a shifting reflection just hours before. She was moonbound, a woman awakened, a woman on the cusp of transformation. And she was ready, at last, to face her destiny. She squared her shoulders, the chill not bothering her, nor the eyes she knew were trained in her direction. Chapter 8. The Hunter's Moon. The days that followed were a blur of new experiences, unfamiliar faces, and unsettling revelations. Evan found herself immersed in the life of the Blackwood pack, learning their customs, their traditions, their ways. It was a world far removed from her quiet, predictable life in Havenwood, a world of raw power, primal instincts, and ancient magic. She spent her days exploring the settlement, observing the pack members as they went about their daily routines, hunting, training, tending to the land. She learned that they were not the savage, bloodthirsty creatures she'd imagined, but a complex and nuanced community, bound by a deep sense of loyalty, kinship, and respect for the natural world. She also began to learn more about her own lineage, about the Silverwood pack, and the betrayal that had shattered the alliance with the Blackwood pack. Moira, despite her initial hostility, took on the role of Evan's tutor, guiding her through the history, the lore, the responsibilities of being moonbound. Evan discovered that the Silverwood pack had been known for their healing abilities, their connection to the earth, their ability to communicate with animals. They were the peacemakers, the mediators, the ones who maintained the balance between the human and supernatural worlds. But Eric, her ancestor, had been seduced by power, by the desire to control the magic of the Blackwood Pack, a magic that was deeply rooted in the ancient forests of Maine. He had broken the oath, betrayed his allies, and plunged the two packs into a centuries-long conflict. The more Evan learned, the more she understood the weight of the debt she carried, the responsibility she had to atone for the sins of her ancestor. But she also began to question the traditional interpretation of the blood debt, the idea that a life must be sacrificed for a life taken. Lorcan, as promised, remained her protector, her guide, her confidant. He was always there, watching over her, answering her questions, easing her fears. He taught her about the shift, about the process of transforming into a wolf, about the power and the freedom that came with it. He told her that the blood moon, which was now waning, had triggered the awakening of her lycanthropic abilities, that the changes within her were irreversible. He explained that she would need to learn to control her new nature, to harness her power, to embrace her inner wolf. Evan was terrified of the shift, of losing control, of becoming something other. But she was also intrigued, drawn to the idea of experiencing the world through a different lens, of connecting with her primal instincts, of flying. One evening, as the full hunter's moon rose high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the Blackwood settlement, Lorcan took her to a secluded clearing deep in the forest. He told her that it was time, that she was ready. The hunter's moon is a time of transformation, he said, his voice low and resonant. A time of embracing your true nature. A time of letting go. He stood before her, his golden eyes glowing in the moonlight, his presence both comforting and intimidating. He was wearing his usual dark clothing, but tonight, he seemed different. Wilder, more primal, his wolf closer to the surface. "I'll be with you," he said, his gaze searching hers. "I'll guide you. I won't let you lose yourself." Evan's heart pounded in her chest. She was terrified, but also excited. She had come this far. She had accepted her destiny. She had embraced the possibility of change. She couldn't turn back now. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm ready." Lorcan smiled, a rare and beautiful sight that sent a shiver down her spine. "Then let go, Evan," he said. "Let go of your fear. Let go of your doubts. Let go of your human self. Embrace the wolf within." He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, and began to shift. Evan watched in awe and terror as his body contorted, his bones cracking, his muscles rippling, his skin stretching and changing. First sprouted, his features elongated, his eyes glowed brighter, his hands and feet transformed into powerful paws. Within seconds, he was no longer Lorcan, the man, but Lorcan, the wolf. A magnificent creature, his fur the color of dark shadows and silver moonlight, his eyes burning with an ancient, primal fire. He let out a low growl, a sound that resonated deep within Evan's soul, awakening something ancient and powerful within her. It was a call, an invitation, a challenge. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let go. She released her fear, her doubts, her inhibitions. She surrendered to the change, to the power that surged through her veins, to the wolf that was clawing its way to the surface. She felt a searing pain, a tearing sensation, as her bones shifted, her muscles stretched, her skin transformed. She cried out, a sound that was both human and animal. And then it was over. She opened her eyes, seeing the world through a new lens, a heightened sense of awareness, a primal clarity. She was no longer Evan the woman, but Evan the wolf, a creature of moonlight and shadow, of instinct and power. She looked at Lorcan, at his magnificent wolf form, and felt a surge of recognition, of kinship, of something deeper. It was a connection that transcended words, a bond that was forged in the heart of the forest, under the light of the hunter's moon. She took her first tentative steps, testing, understanding, and then a howl. Chapter 9. Secrets in the Silverlight. The first shift was exhilarating, terrifying, and utterly transformative. Evanna ran through the moonlit forest alongside Lorcan, their wolf forms moving with a grace and power she'd never imagined possible. She felt the wind in her fur, the earth beneath her paws, the scent of the forest filling her senses. It was a freedom unlike anything she'd ever experienced, a primal connection to the natural world that awakened something deep within her soul. Lorcan, in his wolf form, was a magnificent creature, his dark fur blending seamlessly with the shadows, his golden eyes glowing with an ancient wisdom. He guided her, taught her, protected her, showing her the secrets of the forest, the hidden paths, the language of the wild. They ran for hours, exploring the vast territory of the Blackwood Pack, communicating through a series of growls, howls, and subtle body movements. Evanna discovered that she could understand Lorcan, not just his intentions, but his feelings. It was a connection that went beyond words, a bond that was forged in the shared experience of the shift, in the shared blood of the lycanthrope. As the moon began to set, they returned to the settlement, shifting back into their human forms just before reaching the edge of the clearing. Evanna felt a pang of loss as her wolf form receded, replaced by the familiar, yet now strangely limiting confines of her human body. "How did you feel?" Lorcan asked, his voice hoarse, his eyes still glowing faintly with the remnants of the shift. Evanna struggled to find the words to describe the experience. "It was incredible," she finally said, her voice filled with awe. Like flying. Like being truly free." Lorcan smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes and transformed his features. "It is," he said. "It's a gift, a burden, and a responsibility." Over the next few days, Evanna continued to practice the shift, learning to control her transformations, to harness the power of her wolf form. She discovered that she had a natural affinity for it, a ease and grace that surprised even Moira. The elder Alpha, though still wary of Evanna, began to show a grudging respect for her abilities, for her determination to understand her heritage, to atone for the sins of her ancestor. She continued to tutor Evanna in the history and lore of the Silverwood Pack, revealing secrets that had been hidden for generations. One evening, Moira led Evanna to a small, hidden chamber beneath the Longhouse, a place where the pack kept their most sacred artifacts and records. The room was dimly lit by flickering candles, the air thick with the scent of old parchment and dried herbs. "This," Moira said, gesturing towards a large, leather-bound book resting on a stone pedestal, "is the Silverwood Grimoire. It contains the accumulated knowledge of your ancestors, their spells, their rituals, their secrets." Evanna approached the book with reverence, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on its cover. She opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with elegant script, detailed diagrams, and strange, unsettling symbols. "Most of this is incomprehensible to me," Evanna said, her voice filled with frustration. "I don't understand the language, the symbols." Moira sighed. The knowledge of the Silverwood Pack was passed down orally, from alpha to heir. The grimoire was only used as a reference, a guide. Eric's betrayal disrupted the chain of knowledge, leaving much of it lost. "But there must be something here that can help me," Evanna said, her gaze scanning the pages. "Something that can help me understand the debt, the bond." She paused, her attention caught by a particular page, a drawing of two wolves, one silver, one black, their forms intertwined, their eyes locked in an intense gaze. Beneath the drawing, a single word was written in the ancient script, Animus Nexus. "What is this?" Evanna asked, pointing to the drawing. "What does Animus Nexus mean?" Moira hesitated, her expression troubled. "It's a legend," she said. "A myth. A story of a soul bond so powerful, so complete, that it transcends the boundaries of life and death." "A soul bond?" Evanna repeated, her heart skipping a beat. "Like the one Lorcan mentioned?" Moira nodded. "But Animus Nexus is more than that. It's a merging of two souls on a level that is unimaginable. It creates a connection that is unbreakable, eternal, even beyond the physical realm." "Is it possible?" Evanna asked, her voice barely a whisper. Moira shrugged. "Some say it's just a story, a fanciful tale. Others believe it's the ultimate expression of lycanthropic power, a potential that lies dormant within us all, waiting to be awakened. She closed the grimoire, her gaze meeting Evant's. But know this, Evan, the animus nexus is not something to be taken lightly. It is a bond that demands everything. It requires a complete surrender, a total merging of two beings, with no guarantee of return. She placed a heavy hand on the book. It also requires something that has been missing for generations. She refused to say more, and Evan knew that pressing would do no good. She needed more, needed to know more. Chapter 10. A Dance with Danger. The revelation about animus nexus weighed heavily on Evant's mind. The idea of a soul bond so profound, so complete, that it transcended even death was both terrifying and alluring. It resonated with the connection she felt with Lorcan, the undeniable pull, the sense of recognition that had been there from the beginning. But Moira's warning it requires a complete surrender, a total merging of two beings, with no guarantee of return echoed in her thoughts, a chilling reminder of the risks involved. And the Elder Alpha's final, cryptic statement, it also requires something that has been missing for generations, added another layer of mystery to the puzzle. Evan sought out Lorcan, needing his perspective, his reassurance. She found him in the training grounds, sparring with another pack member, a young, muscular wolf named Kale. They moved with a speed and agility that was breathtaking, their bodies a blur of motion, their growls and snarls echoing through the clearing. Evan watched them, mesmerized by their power, their grace. She was still getting used to the physicality of the pack, the constant displays of strength and dominance, the raw energy that permeated their every interaction. When the sparring match ended, Lorcan approached her, his chest heaving, his golden eyes glowing with exertion. He was still in his partial shift form, his hands and feet tipped with claws, his fangs elongated, his senses heightened. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Evan hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject of animus nexus. She didn't want to reveal her conversation with Moira, not yet, not until she understood more. "I was thinking about the bond," she said, choosing her words carefully, "about what it entails." Lorcan's gaze intensified, his eyes searching hers. And I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Afraid of losing myself, of surrendering completely." He nodded, his expression understanding. "It's a natural fear, Evan. The bond is a powerful force, a commitment that should not be taken lightly."
"But you offered it," she said.
"You said it was a way to heal the rift, to unite the packs." "It is," he replied. "But it's also more than that. For me, at least." He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming, his scent that intoxicating mix of pine and storm filling her senses. She felt that familiar pull toward him, that magnetic force that defied logic, defied fear. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her cheek, his fingers brushing against a stray strand of her silver hair. It was a gesture that had become familiar, a silent communication of something deeper. "I mean," he said, his voice low and intense, "that my feelings for you are not solely based on duty, on obligation, on the debt. They are personal." Evant's heart skipped a beat. Personal? Was he saying what she thought he was saying? "Lorcan," she began, but he interrupted her. "I know," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of tenderness and resignation. "I know it's complicated. I know it's unconventional. But I can't deny what I feel, Evan. I can't deny the connection between us." He withdrew his hand, his gaze lingering on hers for a moment longer before he turned away, looking out over the training grounds, his shoulders slumping slightly. "But it's your decision," he said, his voice barely audible. "You have to choose what's best for you, for your future. Even if that future doesn't include me." His words, though spoken softly, struck Evan like a physical blow. The thought of a future without Lorcan, without his presence, his guidance, his protection, filled her with a sudden, unexpected wave of grief. She realized, in that moment, that her feelings for him had deepened, had transformed from fear and curiosity into something more. Something profound, something undeniable. She was falling in love with him. Before she could respond, a sudden commotion erupted from the edge of the clearing. Several pack members rushed towards them, their faces etched with alarm, their voices raised in urgent calls. "Hunters!" One of them shouted. "They're here. They've breached the perimeter. Hunters!" The word sent a chill down Evan's spine. She knew, from Moira's lessons, that hunters were humans who specialized in tracking and killing lycanthropes, driven by fear, hatred, and misguided beliefs. They were a constant threat, a shadow that loomed over the pack's existence. Lorcan's expression hardened, his eyes flashing with anger. He turned to Evan, his voice urgent. "Stay here," he commanded. "Stay hidden. I'll deal with this." He shifted, his body transforming into his magnificent wolf form in a matter of seconds, and raced towards the source of the commotion, followed by the other pack members. Evan, however, couldn't stay put. She couldn't stand idly by while Lorcan and the others risked their lives. She had to do something, she had to help. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and shifted. Her wolf form emerged, powerful and agile, her senses heightened, her instincts sharpened. She followed the scent of the pack, the scent of danger, towards the edge of the settlement. She arrived just as the confrontation began. A group of hunters, armed with rifles, crossbows, and silver-tipped weapons, had broken through the perimeter defenses and were engaging the pack in a fierce battle. Evan saw Lorcan, his dark fur bristling with rage, leading the charge, his powerful jaws snapping at the hunters, his claws tearing at their flesh. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of teeth and claws, protecting his pack, protecting her. She joined the fray, her own wolf form a blur of motion, attacking the hunters with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed. She felt the sting of silver as a crossbow bolt grazed her flank, but she ignored the pain, driven by a primal urge to protect, to defend. The battle raged, a chaotic dance of danger and death, under the silent gaze of the hunter's moon. The outcome of the battle was far from certain. Chapter 11. The Price of Protection. The forest echoed with the sounds of battle, the snarls and growls of the werewolves, the shouts and screams of the hunters, the clang of metal against claw, the sickening thud of bodies hitting the ground. Evan fought with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed, driven by instinct, adrenaline, and a fierce determination to protect her newfound pack and Lorcan. She moved like a silver shadow, dodging crossbow bolts, weaving through the trees, attacking with teeth and claws. The hunters, though armed with silver-tipped weapons, were no match for the speed and agility of the werewolves. They were outmatched, outnumbered, and outmaneuvered. Evan saw Lorcan, his dark fur matted with blood, both his own and that of the hunters, fighting with a savage grace that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. He was a whirlwind of destruction, tearing through the hunters' ranks, protecting his pack with a ferocity that bordered on madness. She saw him take down a hunter who was aiming a rifle at Moira, the elder alpha struggling against another attacker. Lorcan's jaws closed around the hunter's arm, the sickening crunch of bone echoing through the clearing. The hunter screamed, dropping his weapon, and Lorcan tossed him aside like a rag doll. Evan, fighting alongside Kale, the young wolf she'd seen sparring with Lorcan earlier, managed to disarm another hunter, pinning him to the ground with her weight, her fangs bared, ready to strike. But Kale stopped her.
"No, Evante,"
he growled, his voice low and urgent. "We don't kill unless we have to. We're not like them." Evan hesitated, her bloodlust warring with her conscience. She knew Kale was right. They were not murderers. They were protectors, guardians of the balance, not executioners. She released the hunter, who scrambled away, terrified and defeated. The tide of the battle was turning. The hunters, realizing they were losing, began to retreat, fleeing back into the forest, leaving behind their fallen comrades. Lorcan let out a triumphant howl, a sound that echoed through the trees, signaling the end of the fight. The remaining pack members joined in, their howls a chorus of victory, relief, and mourning. The clearing was a scene of carnage. Bodies lay scattered on the ground, both human and wolf, the air thick with a scent of blood and death. Evan shifted back into her human form, her body aching, her clothes torn and stained with blood, both hers and that of others. She saw Lorcan, also in his human form, kneeling beside a fallen pack member, a young woman named Lyra, her body riddled with silver-tipped arrows. He was holding her hand, his face etched with grief, his golden eyes filled with tears. Evan approached him, her heart heavy with sorrow. She knew that death was a part of life, especially for a pack that lived on the edge of danger, but it didn't make it any easier to bear. Lorcan, she began, but he cut her off. She's gone, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. She saved Moira's life. She took the arrows meant for her. Evan knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. She couldn't find the words to express her sympathy, her shared grief. She knew that Lyra's death would weigh heavily on Lorcan, on the entire pack. Moira approached them, her face pale and drawn, but her expression resolute. "We will honor her sacrifice," she said, her voice strong and clear. "We will remember her courage, her loyalty, and we will continue to fight, to protect our pack, to survive." She looked at Evan, her golden eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else. Something that looked like respect. "You fought well, Evan," she said. "You defended our pack, our home. You proved yourself worthy." Her words, though grudgingly given, meant a great deal to Evan. She had been accepted, not just as a descendant of the Silverwood pack, but as a member of the Blackwood pack. A warrior. A protector. The pack spent the rest of the night tending to their wounded, burying their dead, and mourning their losses. Evan helped where she could, using her limited knowledge of first aid, gleaned from her years as a librarian, to bandage wounds, comfort the injured, and offer solace to the grieving. As the sun began to rise, a low mist settled over the forest. She knew that the battle with the hunters was just one skirmish in a larger war, a conflict that had been raging for centuries. A war that she was now a part of. Lorcan, rising to his feet, turned to her. There was a bleakness to his eyes that sent a shiver through her. "It never ends," he muttered, "the hate, the fighting." Chapter 12. Scars of the Past. Lorcan's words, "it never ends," the hate, the fighting, hung in the air, a heavy shroud of despair settling over them amidst the rising mist. Evan felt his pain, his weariness, his deep-seated fear that the cycle of violence would never be broken. She wanted to offer him comfort, solace, hope, but she didn't know how. She was still new to this world, still grappling with her own fears and uncertainties. The days following the hunters' attack were somber. The pack mourned Lyra's death, honoring her memory with ancient rituals and solemn ceremonies. Evan participated, feeling a growing sense of belonging, a connection to this community that had accepted her, despite her lineage, despite her past. But the attack had also exposed a vulnerability, a weakness in the pack's defenses. Moira, determined to prevent future incursions, ordered increased patrols, stricter security measures, and more intense training sessions. The atmosphere in Blackwood was tense, charged with a mixture of fear, anger, and determination. Lorcan, as the heir to the Alpha, was burdened with responsibility. He spent his days overseeing the pack's defenses, training the younger wolves, and planning for the inevitable next attack. He was distant, preoccupied, his golden eyes shadowed with worry, his usual playful banter replaced by a grim silence. Evan tried to reach him, to offer him support, but he seemed to withdraw further into himself, erecting a wall of emotional distance that she couldn't penetrate. She understood his pain, his burden, but she also felt a growing sense of isolation, a fear that the connection they had forged was fraying. One evening, she found him sitting alone by the river that ran through the Blackwood territory, his back to the settlement, his gaze fixed on the rushing water. He was in his human form, but his posture was tense, his shoulders slumped, his hands clenched into fists. She approached him cautiously, her footsteps muffled by the soft earth. "Lorcan?" she said softly. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her presence. She sat down beside him, close enough to feel his warmth, but not touching him. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the sounds of the river, the rustling of the leaves, the distant calls of the night birds. Finally, Evan spoke. "You're pushing me away," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't deny it. He simply continued to stare at the river, his expression unreadable.
Why?
She asked, her voice trembling. What did I do?" He sighed, running a hand through his dark, silver-streaked hair. "It's not you, Evan, he said, his voice hoarse. "It's me. It's everything. Talk to me, Lorcan," she pleaded. "Let me help you." He turned to look at her, his golden eyes filled with a pain that was almost unbearable to witness. "I can't," he said. "I can't burden you with this. With my past."
His past.
Evan knew that Lorcan carried scars, both physical and emotional, from his years as a werewolf, from the constant threat of hunters, from the responsibilities of his position. But she didn't know the details, the specifics, the secrets that haunted him. "I want to know," she said, her voice firm. "I want to understand. I want to share your burden." He hesitated, his gaze searching hers, as if trying to decide whether to trust her, whether to open himself up to her. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotions, with the weight of unspoken fears. Finally, he began to speak, his voice low and halting, his words filled with a pain that resonated deep within Evan's soul. "Before I became the heir," he said, his gaze drifting back to the river, "before Moira took me under her wing, I wasn't always like this. I was wilder, more reckless, more prone to anger." He paused, taking a deep breath, as if the memories were difficult to confront. I lost control once. During a hunt. I killed a human. A hunter, yes, but it wasn't in self-defense. It was rage.
Pure un'adulterate drage.
Evan felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that werewolves were capable of violence, of killing. But to hear Lorcan, the man she was falling in love with, admit to such an act, it was unsettling. "Moira, she saved me," he continued, his voice barely a whisper. "She found me, covered in blood, consumed by guilt and self-loathing. She could have killed me, exiled me, turned me over to the authorities. But she didn't. She saw something in me, something worth saving. She took me in, trained me, taught me to control my anger, to harness my power for good." "And the scars?" Evan asked, her gaze drawn to the faint, intricate lines that traced patterns across his forehead and down the side of his neck. Lorcan touched the scars, his fingers tracing their contours, as if reliving the moment they were inflicted. "A reminder," he said. "A constant reminder of my past, of my failures. A mark of shame and a symbol of redemption." He turned to look at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of pain and hope. "I'm not proud of who I was, Evan," he said. "But I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be worthy. Worthy of my pack. Worthy of you." Evan reached out, her hand covering his, her fingers intertwining with his. "You are worthy, Lorcan," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "You are strong, you are kind, you are good. You protect your pack, you care for your people, you care for me." He squeezed her hand, his gaze locking with hers. The connection between them, which had seemed to fraying, was now stronger than ever, forged in the crucible of shared pain, shared vulnerability, shared love. "Thank you, Evan," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. For seeing me. For accepting me. Scars and all." The moon shone brightly above them, casting its silvery light on the river, on the forest, on the two figures sitting side by side, their hands clasped together, their hearts intertwined. The scars, once a symbol of shame, were now a testament to resilience, a reminder and a hope. Chapter 13. The Heart's Rebellion. The shared vulnerability of the previous night had created a new intimacy between Evan and Lorcan. The wall of emotional distance he'd erected had crumbled, replaced by a tentative trust, a fragile hope for something more. They spent their days together, training, exploring the forest, talking, sharing their thoughts, their fears, their dreams. Evan found herself falling deeper in love with him with each passing day. She admired his strength, his compassion, his unwavering loyalty to his pack. She was drawn to his vulnerability, his quiet sadness, his hidden depths. And she was captivated by his wildness, his primal energy, his untamed spirit. Lorcan, too, seemed to reciprocate her feelings. He was more attentive, more affectionate, more open. He would often seek her out, his golden eyes searching hers, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary, his scent that intoxicating mix of pine and storm enveloping her in a comforting embrace. But there were still obstacles, still uncertainties. The debt, the ancient laws of the pack, the disapproval of Moira, these were all looming threats to their burgeoning relationship. And there was also the question of the animus nexus, the soul bond that Moira had described as both a legend and a warning. Evan knew that she needed to learn more about it, to understand its implications, its requirements. She returned to the Silverwood grimoire, poring over its pages, searching for clues, for answers, for guidance. She discovered more details about the animus nexus, scattered fragments of information that hinted at its power, its danger. She learned that it was a bond that could only be forged between two lycanthropes who were perfectly matched, soulmates in the truest sense of the word. It required a complete surrender, a total merging of two beings, a sacrifice of individual identity. And she also found a recurring symbol, a complex, intricate design that appeared on multiple pages of the grimoire, always in connection with the animus nexus. It was a circle, divided into two halves, one silver, one black, with a wolf's head in the center, its eyes glowing with an ethereal light. Evan recognized the symbol. It was similar to the design on her silver wolf's head pendant, the one Thomas had given her years ago, the one that had sparked the awakening of her lycanthropic abilities. She realized, with a jolt of understanding, that the pendant was not just a trinket, a sentimental gift. It was a key, a symbol of her lineage, a connection to the animus nexus, a potential that had been passed down through generations of Silverwood wolves. But what was the something missing for generations that Moira had spoken of? Was it the pendant? Or something else? Something more? Evan had decided to confront Moira, to demand answers, to unravel the mystery that surrounded the animus nexus. She found the Elder Alpha in the Longhouse, overseeing the preparations for the upcoming full moon ceremony, a ritual that honored the pack's connection to the lunar cycle, to their wolf nature. Moira, Evan said, her voice firm but respectful. I need to talk to you about the animus nexus. Moira turned to look at her, her golden eyes narrowed, her expression wary. What do you want to know? Everything, Evan replied. I want to know what it is, how it works, what it requires. And I want to know what you meant when you said that something was missing for generations. Moira sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. She gestured for Evan to sit, and they moved to a quieter corner of the longhouse, away from the bustling activity. The animus nexus, Moira began, her voice low and measured, is the ultimate expression of lycanthropic power, a bond that transcends the physical realm, a merging of two souls. It is said to create a connection so strong, so complete, that it can overcome any obstacle, even death. But it's also dangerous, Evan said.
You warned me about that.
Moira nodded. It requires a complete surrender, a total loss of self. The two individuals who forge the bond become one. Their thoughts, their feelings, their memories become intertwined, inseparable. There is no guarantee that they will retain their individual identities, their sense of self. And the missing piece? Evan pressed.
What is it?
Moira hesitated, her gaze shifting away from Evance, as if she was reluctant to reveal the truth. It's love, Evan, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. True, unconditional, selfless love. The kind of love that transcends the boundaries of species, of lineage, of prejudice. The kind of love that your ancestor, Eric, destroyed when he betrayed the Blackwood Pack. Evan felt a chill run down her spine. Love? Was that the key to the animus nexus? Was that the missing piece that had prevented the two packs from forging such a bond for generations? She thought about her feelings for Lorcan, the undeniable pull, the connection that she felt towards him. It was a love that was growing stronger with each passing day, a love that defied logic, defied fear, defied the ancient laws of the pack. Moira truly looked at Evan. It is also something that no one can ever force, she added. Evan's heart was a trapped, frantic bird. Chapter 14. A Glimmer of Hope. Moira's revelation that true, unconditional love was the missing key to the animus nexus resonated deeply with Evan. It confirmed what she had already begun to suspect, what her heart had been telling her all along. Her feelings for Lorcan were more than just attraction, more than just a connection forged by shared experience, shared blood. It was love, a love that was growing stronger, deeper, more undeniable with each passing day. But it was also a love that was fraught with challenges, with obstacles, with uncertainties. The ancient laws of the pack, the disapproval of Moira, the debt that still hung over her head, these were all formidable barriers to their happiness. And there was also the question of Lorcan's feelings. He had admitted that his feelings for her were personal, that he couldn't deny the connection between them. But he had also been hesitant, cautious, burdened by his past, by his responsibilities. Evan knew that she needed to talk to him, to confess her feelings, to lay bare her heart and see if he felt the same way. But she was also afraid of rejection, afraid of jeopardizing the fragile bond they had forged. The full moon ceremony, which was fast approaching, added another layer of complexity to the situation. It was a time of heightened emotions, of increased power, of transformation. It was a time when the veil between the human and supernatural worlds was thinnest, when the wolf within was closest to the surface. Evan knew that the ceremony would be a test, a challenge, a crucible for her relationship with Lorcan. It would either strengthen their bond or break it apart. As the day of the ceremony arrived, the atmosphere in Blackwood was thick with anticipation, with excitement, with tension. The pack members prepared for the ritual, decorating the clearing with wildflowers, lighting torches, and chanting ancient prayers. Evan, dressed in a simple white dress made of soft, flowing fabric, felt a mixture of nervousness and exhilaration. She was about to participate in a sacred ritual, a ceremony that had been performed by her ancestors for centuries. She was about to connect with her wolf nature, to embrace her heritage, to face her destiny. She saw Lorcan, standing near the center of the clearing. His eyes were the gold that reflected the flames around him. He looked magnificent, powerful, his presence radiating a raw, untamed energy that made her heart race. He was wearing a ceremonial robe made of dark wolf fur, his silver-streaked hair unbound, his golden eyes glowing in the firelight. He caught her gaze, and a faint smile touched his lips. He nodded to her, a silent acknowledgement, a reassurance. She felt a surge of warmth, of hope, that eased her fears, at least for the moment. As the full moon rose high in the sky, casting its silvery glow over the clearing, Moira began the ceremony. She chanted in the ancient language of the lycanthropes, her voice strong and clear, her words resonating with power, with magic. The pack members joined in, their voices blending in a harmonious chorus, their bodies swaying rhythmically to the beat of a drum. The air crackled with energy, with anticipation, with transformation. Evan felt the shift begin, the familiar sensation of her bones cracking, her muscles stretching, her skin changing. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the power that surged through her veins, to the wolf that was clawing its way to the surface. She opened her eyes, seeing the world through a new lens, a heightened sense of awareness, a primal clarity. She was no longer Evan, the woman, but Evan, the wolf, a creature of moonlight and shadow, of instinct and power. She looked at Lorcan, who was also in his wolf form, his dark fur blending seamlessly with the shadows, his golden eyes burning with an ancient fire. He was magnificent, awe-inspiring, a vision of untamed beauty. He approached her, his movements fluid and graceful, his gaze locking with hers. They circled each other, their bodies brushing, their scents mingling, their souls connecting. It was a dance, a ritual, a courtship. It was a silent communication of their feelings, their desires, their love. As the moon reached its zenith, Moira raised her hands, signaling the climax of the ceremony. The chanting intensified, the drumming grew louder, the air crackled with magic. Evanna and Lorcan stood face to face, their wolf forms almost touching, their eyes locked in an intense gaze. They felt a surge of power, a connection that transcended the physical realm, a merging of their spirits. It was not the animus nexus, not yet. But it was a glimpse, a foretaste of what could be. It was a glimmer of hope, a promise of a future where their love could overcome any obstacle, where their bond could unite the two packs and heal the ancient rift. As the ceremony ended and the pack members began to disperse, Evanna and Lorcan remained standing in the center of the clearing, their human forms slowly returning, their gazes still locked, their hearts intertwined. They knew this was only the beginning, and that the future was far from written. But one thing at least was certain. Chapter 15. The Unveiling Truth. The afterglow of the full moon ceremony lingered, a palpable energy that hummed through Evanna and Lorcan, a silent testament to the deepening connection between them. The shared experience of the ritual, the almost connection in their wolf forms, had brought them closer than ever, stripping away the last vestiges of doubt and fear, leaving only the raw, undeniable truth of their feelings. As they walked back towards the settlement, hand in hand, Lorcan finally broke the silence that had enveloped them since the end of the ceremony. "Evanna," he said, his voice low and earnest, his thumb caressing the back of her hand, "what we felt out there, it was more than just the ceremony. It was us." Evanna nodded, her heart overflowing with emotion. "I know," she whispered. "I felt it too." He stopped, turning to face her, his golden eyes searching hers, his expression filled with a mixture of tenderness and vulnerability. I love you, Evanna," he said, the words raw and unfiltered, a confession that had been building within him for weeks. Tears welled up in Evanna's eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming love. "I love you too, Lorcan," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "More than I ever thought possible." He pulled her close, embracing her tightly, his body warm and strong against hers. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, savoring the moment, the truth of their love. But the reality of their situation, the obstacles that still stood in their way, soon intruded upon their blissful moment. The debt, the ancient laws, Moira's disapproval, these were all still looming threats to their happiness. "What are we going to do?" Evan asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "How can we be together?" Lorcan sighed, his breath warm against her hair. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm not giving up. I'm not letting you go. We'll find a way, Evanna. I promise you." His words, though filled with determination, couldn't entirely dispel Evanna's fears. She knew that the path ahead would be difficult, perhaps even dangerous. The next day, Evanna decided to take matters into her own hands. She needed to understand the full extent of the debt, the consequences of her lineage, the secrets that Moira was still keeping from her. She returned to the Silverwood grimoire, determined to decipher its mysteries, to unlock its hidden knowledge. She spent hours poring over its pages, studying the symbols, the diagrams, the ancient script. She focused on the recurring symbol of the animus nexus, the circle divided into two halves, one silver, one black, with the wolf's head in the center. She realized that it was more than just a symbol, it was a map, a guide to something. She noticed that the symbol was often accompanied by a series of coordinates, numbers and letters that seemed to correspond to locations within the Blackwood territory. She recognized some of the locations: the river, the clearing where they had performed the full moon ceremony, the ancient standing stones that marked the boundary of the pack's land. She realized, with a jolt of understanding, that the grimoire was not just a book of spells and rituals, it was a treasure map, a guide to the location of something important, something connected to the animus nexus. She decided to follow the coordinates, to explore the locations marked in the grimoire, to uncover the truth that had been hidden for generations. She started with the standing stones, the ancient, weathered monoliths that stood at the edge of the Blackwood territory, a silent testament to the pack's long history, their connection to the land. She found the stones easily, their imposing forms silhouetted against the afternoon sky. She approached them cautiously, her senses heightened, her wolf instincts on alert. She examined the stones, searching for any markings, any clues that might correspond to the symbols in the grimoire. She found one, a faint, almost imperceptible carving of the Animus Nexus symbol, hidden beneath a layer of moss and lichen. She carefully cleared away the moss, revealing the symbol in its entirety. As she touched it, she felt a surge of energy, a vibration that ran through her body, connecting her to the stones, to the land, to something else. She closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation, letting it guide her. She felt a pull, a drawing towards a specific location, a hidden spot within the circle of stones. She opened her eyes and followed the pull, her instincts leading her to small, unassuming rock, nestled at the base of one of the larger stones. She knelt down and examined the rock, noticing a faint crack, a seam that ran along its surface. She realized, with a growing sense of excitement, that the rock was not solid, it was a container, a hiding place. She carefully pried it open, revealing a small, hollow space within. Inside, she found a single object, a silver amulet, identical to the one she wore, but older, more intricate, its surface gleaming with an ethereal light. As she held it up, light catching in its detailed carvings, a voice echoed in her head. Not Moira's, not Lorcan's, but one unfamiliar, yet
Known.
the key is not one, but two. Only together can the door be unlocked. It was her, the woman from the reflection. Chapter 16. Torn Between Worlds. The voice, clear yet ethereal, resonated within Avant's mind, sending shivers down her spine. The woman from the reflection, her ancestor? The message, the key is not one, but two. Only together can the door be unlocked, was cryptic, yet it hinted at the true nature of the Animus Nexus, at the missing piece that Moira had spoken of. The two amulets, hers and the one she'd found hidden within the standing stones, were clearly connected, two halves of a whole, two keys to unlocking the power of the soul bond. But what was the door? And what lay beyond it? Evana returned to the settlement, her mind racing, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She needed to talk to Lorcan, to share her discovery, to unravel the mystery together. She found him in the training grounds, overseeing a sparring session between the younger wolves. He saw her approaching, and a smile lit up his face, his golden eyes sparkling with love. She showed him the amulet, explaining how she'd found it, the message she'd received. He examined it carefully, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings, his expression filled with awe. "This changes everything, Evana," he said, his voice low and serious. This confirms what we suspected. The Animus Nexus is real, and it's within our reach." But his excitement was tempered by a note of caution. He knew that the power of the soul bond was not to be taken lightly, that it came with risks, with responsibilities. "We need to be careful," he said. "We need to understand what we're dealing with, what this door represents. We need to prepare." They decided to seek Moira's guidance, to confront her with their discovery, to demand answers to their remaining questions. They found the elder Alpha in the longhouse, poring over ancient texts, her brow furrowed in concentration. Evana showed her the two amulets, explaining how she'd found the second one, the message she'd received. Moira's eyes widened in surprise, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fear. "You found it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You actually found it." She took the amulets, examining them closely, her fingers tracing their contours, her golden eyes glowing with an ancient knowledge. "These are the keys of Animus," she said, her voice filled with awe. "They are the legacy of the Silverwood and Blackwood pacts, a symbol of our potential for unity, for power." "But what is the door?" Evana asked, her voice urgent. "What does it unlock?" Moira hesitated, her gaze shifting away from Avance, as if she was reluctant to reveal the truth. "The door," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, "is the gateway to the spirit realm. The realm of our ancestors, the source of our magic, the essence of our lycanthropic power. Evan felt a chill run down her spine. The spirit realm? It was a concept she'd only read about in books, a mythical place, a dimension beyond human comprehension. But why would we want to go there?
She asked.
What's the purpose? Moira sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. The animus nexus, she explained, is not just a bond between two individuals. It's a bond between two lineages, two packs. And it's a bond that extends beyond the physical realm, into the spiritual realm. By forging the animus nexus, she continued, you and Lorcan would not only unite your souls, but you would also unite the spirits of your ancestors, the collective consciousness of the Silverwood and Blackwood packs. You would heal the ancient rift, restore the balance, and unlock a power that has been dormant for centuries. It was a staggering revelation, a concept that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The animus nexus was not just about love, about personal connection, it was about destiny, about fulfilling a purpose that transcended their individual lives. But the risks were immense. Entering the spirit realm, merging with the collective consciousness of their ancestors, it was a journey with no guarantee of return, a sacrifice that could cost them their individual identities, their sense of self. Evan looked at Lorcan, her heart torn between her love for him and her fear of the unknown. She saw the same conflict reflected in his golden eyes, the same mixture of desire and trepidation. They were standing at a crossroads, a pivotal moment in their lives, in the history of their packs. They had a choice to make, a decision that would determine not only their own fate, but the fate of their entire lineage. They could choose to walk away, to reject the power of the animus nexus, to remain in the familiar, relatively safe world of the living. Or they could choose to embrace their destiny, to venture into the unknown, to unlock the potential that lay dormant within them, to forge a bond that would transcend the boundaries of life and death. Moira looked at them, her gaze filled with the wisdom and sadness that were the hallmarks of being an alpha. The choice, she said, is entirely yours. But be warned, it is a choice that cannot be unmade. Chapter 17. The Ancient Curse. Moira's words, the choice is entirely yours. But be warned, it is a choice that cannot be unmade, hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the gravity of the decision facing Evan and Lorcan. The animus nexus, the spirit realm, the merging of their souls, and the collective consciousness of their ancestors, it was a path fraught with peril, with uncertainty, with the potential for both unimaginable power and irreversible loss. They spent the next few days in a state of intense deliberation, wrestling with their fears, their desires, their responsibilities. They talked for hours, exploring the implications of the animus nexus, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Evan was torn. She loved Lorcan with all her heart, and the idea of forging a bond with him that transcended even death was intoxicating. But she was also afraid of losing herself, of sacrificing her individual identity, of venturing into a realm that was beyond human comprehension. Lorcan, too, was conflicted. He felt the same pull towards Evan, the same desire to unite their souls, to heal the ancient rift between their packs. But he was also burdened by his past, by his responsibilities as the heir to the Alpha, by the fear of repeating the mistakes of his ancestors. He knew that the animus nexus was not just about personal connection, it was about destiny, about fulfilling a purpose that had been ordained centuries ago. But he also knew that it was a path that could lead to destruction, to madness, to the loss of everything he held dear. One evening, as they sat together by the river, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, Lorcan finally spoke his mind. Evan, he said, his voice low and serious, his hand finding hers, his thumb caressing the silver of her wolf pendant, I can't deny the pull I feel towards you, towards the animus nexus. It's overwhelming. It's like fate. He paused, his gaze searching hers, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of love and trepidation. But I'm also afraid, he admitted. Afraid of what it might do to us, to our souls. Afraid of losing you. Evan squeezed his hand, her heart aching with his vulnerability, his honesty. I'm afraid too, Lorcan, she said. But I also believe in us. I believe in our love. And I believe that we can face this together. He smiled, a faint, tentative smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Together, he repeated. That's the key, isn't it? The message from your ancestor. The key is not one, but two. Only together can the door be unlocked. They fell silent, contemplating the words, the meaning behind them. They knew that the animus nexus was not something they could undertake alone, that it required a partnership, a complete trust, a selfless love. Suddenly, Lorcan's expression changed, his eyes widening in realization. Evan, he said, his voice urgent. The message, it's not just about us. It's about the curse. The curse. Evan had almost forgotten about it. The ancient curse that Moira had mentioned in passing. The shadow that had hung over the Silverwood and Blackwood packs for centuries. What curse? She asked, her voice trembling.
What are you talking about?
Lorcan explained that the curse was a consequence of Eric's betrayal, a spiritual wound that had been inflicted upon both packs, a barrier that had prevented them from forging the animus nexus for generations. Eric's actions, he said, didn't just break the oath, they shattered the spiritual connection between our packs. He created a rift in the spirit realm, a void that has been filled with darkness, with negativity, with the lingering echoes of his hatred. And the curse, he continued, prevents any Silverwood or Blackwood wolf from fully accessing the power of the spirit realm, from forging the animus nexus. It's a safeguard, a protection against another betrayal, another misuse of power. Evan felt a chill run down her spine. The curse, it was another obstacle, another layer of complexity to the already daunting challenge they faced. So, how do we break it?
She asked.
How do we heal the rift? Lorcan's gaze met hers, his golden eyes filled with a newfound determination.
By facing it, he said.
By entering the spirit realm, together, and confronting the darkness that Eric created. By proving that our love is stronger than his hatred, that our unity is more powerful than his betrayal. It was a terrifying prospect, a journey into the heart of darkness, a confrontation with the lingering spirit of her ancestor, the architect of the curse. But it was also the only way, the only path to fulfilling their destiny, to forging the animus nexus, to uniting their packs. We do it together, as the message said. Evan responded, the words coming before she could even consider. Lorcan looked at her, his gaze searching and full. Are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything in my entire life. Chapter 18. Sacrifice and Salvation. The decision was made. Evan and Lorcan would enter the spirit realm, together, to confront the ancient curse, to heal the rift between their packs, and to forge the animus nexus. It was a perilous undertaking, a journey into the unknown, with no guarantee of return. But they were united in their purpose, their love a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. They informed Moira of their decision, and the Elder Alpha, though initially apprehensive, ultimately gave them her blessing. She knew that it was their destiny, their right, to attempt the animus nexus, to fulfill the potential that had been dormant within their lineages for centuries. Moira also revealed a crucial piece of information, a secret that had been passed down through generations of Blackwood Alphas. She told them that the entrance to the spirit realm, the door mentioned in the message from Avant's ancestor, was located at a specific place within the Blackwood territory, the Whispering Falls, a secluded waterfall hidden deep within the forest, a place where the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds was said to be thinnest. She also warned them that the spirit realm was not a place of peace and tranquility, it was a reflection of the collective consciousness of the lycanthropes, a realm filled with both light and darkness, with beauty and terror. It was a place where their deepest fears, their darkest desires, their unresolved conflicts would be manifest, amplified, and brought to life. They prepared for their journey meticulously, gathering supplies, studying the ancient texts, and honing their skills. They practiced their shifts, perfecting their control, strengthening their connection, preparing themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. They also spent time together, simply being in each other's presence, savoring their love, their connection, knowing that it might be their last opportunity to do so. They talked about their hopes, their fears, their dreams, reaffirming their commitment to each other, to their shared destiny. On the eve of their departure, as the full moon began to rise, casting its silvery glow over the Blackwood settlement, they stood before the pack, ready to embark on their perilous journey. Moira performed a blessing, a protection ritual, invoking the spirits of their ancestors, asking for their guidance, their strength, their blessing. The pack members watched them with a mixture of awe, respect, and trepidation. They knew that Eventha and Lorcan were undertaking a task of immense importance, a sacrifice that could determine the fate of their entire lineage, the future of their packs. As the moon reached its zenith, Eventha and Lorcan set off, hand in hand, towards the Whispering Falls, their hearts filled with a mixture of fear and determination. They followed the ancient paths, guided by the moonlight, their wolf senses heightened, their connection to each other growing stronger with each step. They reached the falls as dawn began to break, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange. The waterfall was a breathtaking sight, a cascade of water plunging down a cliff face, surrounded by lush vegetation, the air filled with the roar of the water, the whispers of the wind. They stood at the edge of the pool at the base of the falls, gazing up at the cascading water, feeling the spray on their faces, the power of the place. They knew that this was it, the gateway to the spirit realm, the threshold between two worlds. They looked at each other, their eyes locking, their souls connecting. They didn't need words, they knew what they had to do. They took a deep breath, closed their eyes, and shifted. Their bodies transformed, their human forms replaced by their magnificent wolf forms, their spirits merging, their connection deepening. They stepped into the pool, the cold water swirling around their paws, the roar of the falls filling their ears. They plunged into the depths, swimming towards the cascading water, towards the veil that separated the physical and spiritual realms. As they passed through the veil, they felt a jolt, a tearing sensation, as if their souls were being ripped apart and reassembled. They entered a world unlike anything they had ever imagined, a realm of shifting landscapes, ethereal lights, and swirling shadows. They were in the spirit realm, the collective consciousness of their ancestors, a place where the past, present, and future converged, where the boundaries of reality were blurred, where the power of the lycanthropes was manifest. But they were not alone. They sensed the presence of others, the spirits of their ancestors, both Silverwood and Blackwood, watching them, judging them, testing them. And they also sensed the darkness, the lingering echoes of Eric's betrayal, the curse that had hung over their packs for centuries. It was a palpable presence, a void of negativity, a vortex of hatred and despair. They knew that they had to confront it, to overcome it, to heal the rift that Eric had created. They had to prove that their love was stronger than his hatred, that their unity was more powerful than his betrayal. They braced themselves, the first test already upon them. Chapter 19. The Blood Moon's Return. The spirit realm was a kaleidoscope of shifting landscapes, ethereal lights, and swirling shadows. It was a place where thoughts and emotions took on physical form, where the past, present, and future intertwined, where the boundaries of reality were blurred beyond recognition. Eventha and Lorcan, in their wolf forms, navigated this treacherous terrain, their senses heightened, their connection to each other their only anchor in the swirling chaos. They encountered the spirits of their ancestors, both Silverwood and Blackwood, some benevolent, offering guidance and encouragement, others hostile, testing their resolve, challenging their worthiness. They faced manifestations of their deepest fears, their darkest desires, their unresolved conflicts, battling spectral wolves, navigating treacherous landscapes, and resisting the seductive whispers of the darkness. But the most formidable challenge they faced was the curse itself, the lingering echoes of Eric's betrayal, the spiritual wound that had been inflicted upon their packs centuries ago. It manifested as a vortex of negativity, a swirling void of hatred and despair, a presence that threatened to consume them, to tear them apart. They approached the vortex cautiously, their wolf forms bristling with apprehension, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. They knew that they had to confront it, to overcome it, to heal the rift that Eric had created. As they drew closer, they saw him, Eric, or rather, his spirit, his lingering essence, trapped within the vortex, his eyes burning with a malevolent fire, his form twisted and contorted by centuries of hatred and regret. He recognized Evina, his descendant, and a sneer twisted his lips. "You," he spat, his voice a rasping whisper that echoed through the spirit realm. "You dare to come here? To challenge me? To undo what I have done?" Evina, in her wolf form, stood her ground, her silver fur bristling, her blue eyes burning with a righteous fire. "We are here to heal the rift you created, Eric," she growled. "To unite our packs, to forge a new future." Eric laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that sent shivers down their spines.
"You are fools," he said.
"You cannot undo what has been done. The hatred, the betrayal, the curse, it is eternal. It is unbreakable." Lorcan, his dark fur blending with the shadows, stepped forward, his golden eyes blazing with defiance. "We are not afraid of you, Eric," he growled. "Our love is stronger than your hatred. Our unity is more powerful than your betrayal." Eric's eyes narrowed, his gaze shifting between Evina and Lorcan, recognizing the connection between them, the power of their bond. "The Animus Nexus?" He sneered. "You think you can forge such a bond? You are deluded. It is forbidden. It is impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Evina retorted, her voice ringing with conviction. "We are here to prove you wrong. We are here to break the curse." With a shared glance, a silent communication of their intent, Evina and Lorcan launched themselves at the vortex, their wolf forms merging into a blur of silver and black, their spirits uniting, their love a weapon against the darkness. They attacked Eric's spirit, their claws and teeth tearing at his ethereal form, their howls echoing through the spirit realm, a battle cry of defiance, of hope, of redemption. The battle raged, a fierce and brutal struggle between love and hatred, between unity and betrayal, between the past and the future. Eric fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, his hatred fueled by centuries of regret and self-loathing. But Evina and Lorcan were stronger, their love a shield against his attacks, their unity a force that could not be broken. They pushed him back, forcing him to confront his past, his mistakes, his crimes. As they fought, they began to heal the rift, to mend the spiritual wound that Eric had inflicted upon their packs. The vortex of negativity began to shrink, the darkness began to recede, replaced by a glimmer of light, of hope, of forgiveness. Finally, with a combined effort, a surge of power fueled by their love, their connection, their shared destiny, they overwhelmed Eric's spirit, shattering his ethereal form, releasing him from his torment, breaking the curse. The spirit realm trembled, the vortex disappeared, replaced by a wave of light, of energy, of healing. The spirits of their ancestors, both Silverwood and Blackwood, cheered, their voices blending in a harmonious chorus, celebrating the victory, the redemption, the new beginning. Evina and Lorcan, exhausted but triumphant, stood side by side, their wolf forms intertwined, their souls merged, their love a beacon of hope in the newly cleansed spirit realm. They had done it. They had faced their fears, confronted the darkness, and healed the ancient rift. They had broken the curse and paved the way for the Animus Nexus. As they prepared to return to the physical realm, a full, blood moon began to rise, its crimson glow filling the spirit realm, bathing them in its power, its magic, its blessing. It was a sign, a confirmation, that they were on the right path, that their destiny was within reach. It sank low, ready to give way to dawn, as they returned. Chapter 20. A Love Forged in Moonlight. The return to the physical realm was as jarring as the departure, a wrenching sensation of separation and reintegration. Evina and Lorcan found themselves back at the Whispering Falls, the cascading water a soothing balm to their battered spirits, the rising sun painting the sky with a promise of a new day. They shifted back into their human forms, their bodies aching, their minds reeling from the intensity of their experience in the spirit realm. They embraced, clinging to each other, drawing strength and comfort from their shared victory, their enduring love. They knew that the final step, the forging of the Animus Nexus, still lay ahead. But they were no longer afraid. They had faced their fears, confronted the darkness, and emerged triumphant. They were ready, at last, to embrace their destiny, to unite their souls, to become one. They returned to the Blackwood settlement, where the pack awaited them, their faces etched with anxiety, with hope, with anticipation. As Eventhe and Lorcan emerged from the forest, hand in hand, their clothes torn, their bodies bearing the marks of their battle, but their eyes shining with a newfound light, a collective cheer erupted. Moira rushed towards them, her expression a mixture of relief and awe. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. You broke the curse." Eventhe and Lorcan nodded, their hearts overflowing with gratitude, with love for their pack, for their ancestors, for each other. They knew that the time had come to perform the Animus Nexus ritual, to complete the journey they had begun, to forge a bond that would transcend the boundaries of life and death. They chose to perform the ritual at the Standing Stones, the place where Eventhe had found the second amulet, the key to unlocking the power of the soul bond. It was a place of ancient magic, a nexus between the physical and spiritual realms, a fitting location for their union. As the full moon, now waning from its blood-red hue, rose high in the sky, casting its silvery glow over the clearing, the entire pack gathered, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of torches, their hearts filled with hope and anticipation. Eventhe and Lorcan stood before the circle of stones, dressed in ceremonial robes, their hands clasped together, their eyes locked in an intense gaze. They held the two amulets, the keys of Animus, their surfaces gleaming with an ethereal light, their power resonating with their love. Moira, acting as the officiant, began the ritual, chanting in the ancient language of the lycanthropes, her voice strong and clear, her words invoking the spirits of their ancestors, calling upon the magic of the moon, the power of the earth. The air crackled with energy, the ground trembled beneath their feet, the wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of pine and storm, the essence of their shared destiny. Eventhe and Lorcan repeated the ancient vows, their voices blending in harmonious chorus, their words a testament to their love, their commitment, their willingness to surrender to each other, to merge their souls, to become one. As they spoke the final words of the vows, they raised the amulets, bringing them together, the two halves of the key uniting, locking into place, releasing a surge of power that enveloped them, lifted them, transformed them. They felt their bodies dissolving, their spirits merging, their consciousness expanding. They were no longer two separate individuals, they were one. One soul, one being, one entity, bound together by a love that transcended time, space, and even death. The pack watched in awe as Eventhe and Lorcan, bathed in the silvery light of the moon, their forms shimmering and shifting, their essence merging, their love a beacon of hope for the future. The Animus Nexus was complete. The ancient rift was healed. The two packs were united, and Eventhe and Lorcan, bound together by a love forged in moonlight, were eternal. The light faded, and when it cleared, they stood, hands clasped, eyes alight. It was done. Epilogue. The years that followed the forging of the Animus Nexus were a time of peace, prosperity, and unprecedented unity for the Silverwood and Blackwood packs. The ancient rift was healed, the curse was broken, and the two packs, once divided by hatred and betrayal, now stood together, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Eventhe and Lorcan, bound together by their eternal love, led their people with wisdom, compassion, and unwavering dedication. They were more than just leaders, they were symbols of hope, of unity, of the transformative power of love. They were no longer referred to by their individual names, but as the Joined Alphas, a title that reflected their unique bond, their shared destiny. The spirit realm, once a place of darkness and conflict, was now accessible to all members of the united packs. They could commune with their ancestors, draw upon their wisdom, and harness the ancient magic that flowed through their veins. The Animus Nexus had not only united Evenle and Lorcan's souls, but it had also enhanced their individual abilities. Evance's healing powers were amplified, allowing her to mend even the most grievous wounds, to soothe the most troubled spirits. Lorcan's strength and leadership skills were magnified, making him an even more formidable protector, a wise and just ruler. But the most profound change was the love that radiated from them, a palpable force that touched everyone around them, inspiring compassion, understanding, and forgiveness. They fostered a culture of acceptance, of tolerance, of unity, within their packs and beyond. They reached out to other lycanthrope packs, sharing their knowledge, their experience, their hope for a future where werewolves could live in peace, free from the fear of hunters, free from the burden of ancient hatreds. Evenle and Lorcan, the joined alphas, never forgot the sacrifices they had made, the challenges they had overcome to reach this point. They cherished every moment together, their love a constant source of strength, of comfort, of joy. They often returned to the Whispering Falls, the place where their journey had begun, the gateway to the spirit realm. They would stand there, hand in hand, gazing at the cascading water, remembering the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty they had felt, and marveling at the miracle of their love, the power of their bond. They also visited the Standing Stones, the place where the Animus Nexus ritual had been performed, the nexus between the physical and spiritual realms. They would touch the stones, feeling the ancient magic flowing through them, connecting them to their ancestors, to their heritage, to their shared destiny. And as the years turned into decades and the decades into centuries, Evenle and Lorcan, the joined alphas, remained, their love undiminished, their bond unbreakable, their legacy eternal. They were a living testament to the power of love, the possibility of redemption, the hope for a better future. They lived, not forever young, but forever together, aging as one, their bodies growing frail, but never their intertwined spirits. And when, at long last, their time in the physical realm came to an end, they passed peacefully, hand in hand, their souls already united, their love a beacon of light that would continue to shine for generations to come, a legend whispered on the wind, a testament to the enduring power of a love forged in moonlight. The wolves howled, not in mourning, but a celebration. The end.